according to prophecy, or already are, biotechnology and transhumanism, the idea of a Babylonian Stargate, perhaps that we may be, even if we don't know it, partially why we may be, the United States that is, in Iran and Iraq and Babylon at this very time. So first of all, we're seeing science that parallels what the gods or the watchers of antiquity did, where new life forms are being created through the blending of species. And these ancient stories tell us that this created a body, a portal, into which the gods downloaded themselves or uploaded themselves or incarnated themselves. Pick whatever term you want to use. They left their reality according to Enoch, according to Genesis, according to the books of Peter, the book of Jude. And the question for us then might be, could we today create something? Are we creating something through our willingness to cross over the species barrier, which God commanded us not to do, where we're making things that are part human, part animal, part plant, part synthetic? If people go to Raiders News Network today, there's an article that Donna put up over there, or maybe she put it up yesterday, where they're creating part human, part pig chimeras, but these things can't be killed at 14 days. The reason I know they're not going to be is because they're being raised to a mature level so that they can produce organs for xenotransplantation, for the transplanting of humanized organs inside of pigs, inside of humans. Steve, we're talking about pigs that are part human being grown to such maturity that the organs can be transplanted. We're doing this now. But are these going to be things that, like the ancient identicals of them, are capable of peering into and interacting with dimensions that exist around us but that are invisible to the human eye? In other words, biotech and related sciences. And by the way, I am headed towards the Babylonian Stargate you asked me about.
No, I know, I'm following you. I know exactly where you're going.
Tell us that this happened once before. And that biotech and this altering of the human species might be a repeat of that ancient science, which will allow, let's put it into the very near future, will allow for the return of the Anunnaki, the incarnation of what Eric von Däniken doesn't understand. Not just the chariots of the gods, the beings of extraordinary condition that came to the earth, semigods and demigods like Gilgamesh, which you wrote about in your book, The Giants, who walked the earth.
And whose body was taken by special operations in Iraq when the tomb of Gilgamesh was found.
Well, and to support that, Steve, now, partly what you're saying is based on intelligence that you receive, but people can go back, probably can still go back, and just Google in Yahoo and find the actual, UPI or whatever it was, news report that came out when the archaeologists there in Iraq, were doing their archaeological dig and came upon the grave marker for Gilgamesh. And immediately the military swoops in, and that's the end of anything that we know about it unless you've got some kind of intelligence information.
Well, I do, and I want to share this with you. I do, and also the thing is that the Stargate, the technological aspect of the Stargate, was so critical, mission critical. Oh boy, now I'm going to really, I'm going to do this in such a way that different parts of it were sequestered in different parts of the world. You follow me? In other words, it's almost like something people would read in a science fiction novel, where the people who are wise, and there have been those men and women who God has, Tom, that have protected us from this stuff. And it's not a secret society where everybody goes around in robes. These are men and women who are dedicated, but they're also very, very, how do I say, under the surface. They're so dark that, that when I say dark, I don't mean morally dark.
No, I got you.
Yeah. But, the thing is that what people don't understand is, did we not build, sir, the largest military complex, pretty much, I think one of the largest military complexes by the actual square footage in the very area that we're talking about? What is there? Or quote, like one general said, it's not what's on top, Steve, it's what's underground. He said when people see the pyramids, when they see the great temples of the world, they only look at what's above ground. He said what's really underground is where all the action is. So, Tom, isn't it interesting that if the military has Gilgamesh, okay, but for the record, he was part man, he would be considered a Rephaim, a Nephilim, the bottom line is he was a giant. And people used to remember, they thought that was just some kind of poet, Babylonian poet. He was a real guy. And he really fought monsters. One of the things I think people need to understand, you said something that's so critical. Most people think that the fallen angels just basically polluted the seed of woman. And they always say, well, Jesus said in heaven they're neither taken nor given in marriage. That's in heaven. These guys didn't stay, as Jude says, in the estate that God created them. But, it's fascinating because I have fragments of the Book of Giants, part of the Dead Sea Scrolls that are on my website that talks about them absolutely going after everything. Now, I don't know how, you have sex with plant life, or, it's easy to figure it out with animal, but the great mythological creatures that you and I deal so much time with, or we spend a lot of time with, this stuff isn't based on just the caricatures of Marvel Comics 4000 BC. This is the actual records, voluminous records throughout the world, that these fallen entities polluted everything. Everything that God created and saw that's good, these entities are trying to destroy and basically impregnate with their seed of rebellion. And when you talk about Gilgamesh, and we're talking about Babylon, we're talking about the plains of Shinar, we're talking about Iraq, the thing is I find it fascinating that the very Babylonian gateway to the gods, and by the way, there are, as I've been told, there are literally hundreds and hundreds of portals throughout the earth, okay, and what we would call stargates. The question is that Babylon is the most amazing one because it obviously brought about God's wrath and intervention in the language of the peoples on earth. But God had to literally dissipate, if you will, the population of the plains of Shinar, because what did he say? What did God say if mankind in their rebellion got that technology? You remember what he said. They would basically, nothing would be kept from them, right?
Right, that's right.
So, I'm sorry, it's just, how wound up I get when you and I get...
And Steve, I love it. Last week you said you love it when I get on a roll. I love it when you get wound up.
Yeah. Listen, I'm wound tighter than a 40-day clock. Because this stuff...
Well, you're certainly more of a scholar in this area than I am. I'm more of a researcher and a speculator. You mentioned a minute ago, how in the world did the Watchers have sex with plants?
Yep.
But what if it, what if it wasn't sex per se,
right?
But it was an intercourse via. Look, what are we doing right now? We can implant women using science to have different kinds of babies, and some of these mixed hybrid embryos. Some of the ethicists and scientists, bioethicists, who were recently conversing before the United Kingdom, before they went ahead and approved the creation by application of these mixed hybrid human-animal chimeras. Some of their own bioethicists were saying that once you approve this science, it's only inevitable that at some point we are going to be implanting these mixed hybrids into women and bringing them to full maturity. And it was some of the Catholic Church's own bishops that got up and said that if a woman who contributes ovum or whatever for the producing of these embryos, if she should suddenly get a conscious attack and wants to have this baby as her own, then she has the moral, ethical right to be able to make that case in a court of law. She ought to be able to have this baby and raise it to full maturity. So I can't separate science from what we're talking about. I mean, I think what happened with the Watchers and the plants and the animals and the humans was the kind of science that we're talking about today, not just natural sexual intercourse. Somehow they embodied themselves, they took women for wives, and they had babies. We're talking about the use of science to blend DNA that was then somehow inserted into women, and they gave birth to these things. And by the way, how do you have sex with animals? People can look this up. Just last week at Oxford University, not Nick Bostrom, but another scientist from Oxford University actually advocating that near future humans blend themselves with animals, but he added something else, also with plants. He said so that future humans would have the ability to produce their own photosynthesis. So, Steve, we're seeing right now the rolling out of the kind of end-time prophecy. Let the prophets foresaw, the redoing, if you will. And you mentioned this, building this giant military base in Babylon. We're also building our largest embassy in the world there, with the largest air force at one of our embassies. to protect it, it's 10 times the size. 10 times.